Welcome to the Reporting for Success and Bigger Budgets webinar, part of the Iterative Marketing Success webinar series hosted by Brilliant Metrics. Be sure to join the conversation using hashtag MSWS16. Brilliant Metrics is a consultancy on a mission to eliminate waste in marketing. They help brands and agencies measure, optimize, and automate their marketing. Today's presenter is Steve Robinson, founder and CEO of Brilliant Metrics. Steve is the host of the Iterative Marketing Podcast, a weekly podcast that explores the strategies, tactics, and concepts you can apply to achieve measurable and continuous improvement in your marketing efforts. Steve is also an instructor and advisor for the digital marketing program at UW Milwaukee School of Continuing Education. Steve's background includes a mixture of marketing and software development with an emphasis on where marketing and technology intersect. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Steve to get things kicked off.
Thank you, Taylor. So today we are going to be presenting a webinar on the topic of reporting for success. And there are going to be basically three components to this. We're going to talk about why reporting is important. We're going to talk about what to report. And specifically, we'll go through ROI, assets, and insights. And then finally, we'll sum it all up and make sure that you have some good takeaways from today's presentation. If you have any questions as we go through today, please feel free to tweet them out or put them in the chat box and we will address them at the end of the webinar. So why is it important that we do report? Not all organizations require in-depth reporting for marketing, and certainly many organizations don't even expect ROI reporting for marketing. But the reality is that marketers generally don't quite get the respect that they should in a lot of organizations today. Some of what we do is still seen as art and not science. And there is an idea that it's sort of fluffy and not really all that measurable and doesn't always connect to the bottom line. If you can make it connect to the bottom line, if you can get it structured with numbers and metrics and prove the value that you're adding, you're going to greatly improve the respect of the marketing organization as a whole within the organization. Secondly, if you're reporting on your results, it can really improve your chances of promotion. Demonstrating your value within the organization in a way that is concrete and tied to numbers can only help you. And then finally, and this is where I think it's most important, is it's all about the money. Because if you're doing an effective job of reporting and proving the value that you bring the organization, they have faith in the money that they're giving you in your budget being put to good use. And when that happens, you can ask for more budget. And then they give you more budget. Your ability to do more goes up, and now you have more to report on. And it becomes this upward spiral of growth where marketing does more, proves more, does more, proves more, etc. So what should be in your marketing report? How do we structure this? You don't want to just give some flatline numbers. This is how much we think we've helped the organization. You're going to want to break it down to some extent, but you also don't want to get it down to the granular level of exactly what each deliverable produced, because if you're reporting up or laterally within the organization, that's too high of a level of detail, and it's not something that they're interested in. What we found is that it is best to group your results by program. In our mind, a program is the intersection between a given audience and a business objective. So for example, if you're a nonprofit, you might have an audience that you're trying to get to donate, and you might be trying to get the same audience to volunteer. That's two programs, despite the fact that they're sharing the same audience. You might have a couple of different types or roles within an organization that you're trying to get engaged, or different industries that you target. You might segment or group your reporting by industry because you have different industries that you're trying to target. The objective is still new business. So to put this visually, you can see here we've got we've got a series of objectives across the top, a series of audiences across the left, and where they intersect, you're going to have individual programs. So in this scenario, consultants might not be applicable for new business or cross-sells, but they're a great referral source. Whereas our insurance and healthcare targets are going to be new business, cross-sell, and referral. So if we were running marketing activities for all of these areas, we would have 7 different programs running that we could report on. What do we need to report for each program? Well, that's where we really need to connect it back to revenue. We want to make sure that we are positioning marketing as a revenue center, not a cost center. A cost center is a part of the organization where if they spend more money, they may or may not produce more revenue. There's no relationship or direct tie between the money that is spent and the money that is earned. Whereas a revenue center, as they spend more money, they make more money. And generally, revenue centers cash flow positively, meaning that they make more money than they spend. If you're going to successfully position your marketing activities as revenue generating, as making marketing a revenue center within the organization, you need to be reporting on revenue. That means projecting revenue. So you want to show we spent X and we earned Y, and Y is greater than X. How do we look at what we spent? When we look at what we spent, we're talking about raw materials. So if this were a factory and we were making stuff, you have raw materials coming in, and then you have finished product going out. In the case of marketing, our raw materials are the media that we use to distribute our message, and any short-term creative that isn't going to continue to generate business for the organization long-term. And then any labor that is directly applied to that media and that short-term creative. On the revenue side, you need to calculate how much money is that bringing in for the organization. And you generally want to do that looking at how much money will that bring into the organization. You're going to be able to measure a series of KPIs immediately. You're going to get immediate feedback on certain KPIs, at least within the 1 month or period for which you're reporting. You need to translate those KPIs then to projected revenue. So KPIs are leading indicators of future performance. These are metrics that you measure that will tell you how things are going to perform in the future. If the KPI is going south, then that means that the revenue will likely go south as well. So you're looking for what are the trajectories of your KPIs, and if your KPIs are going up or down, then from that you can determine the trajectory of revenue in the future. Some examples of some good KPIs that you might want to include in your reporting, and for sure that you're going to want to use in your analysis of projected revenue, are things like marketing qualified leads, MQL, sales qualified leads, some sort of measure or metric of brand awareness, leads, and then leads, phone calls, demos, or trials, or however you're getting indicators of new business coming into the organization. From that, you can now project some revenue. So a very simplified formula for projecting revenue. You're going to take one of your KPIs, or maybe a couple of your KPIs combined, multiply that times a magic number that it's your job to figure out what is, and that'll produce your projected revenue. So let's look at a concrete example here. Let's say that I generated 200 leads in a given reporting period. And I know that there is a certain close rate and a certain lifetime value to those leads. If I multiply the close rate times the average lifetime value, I now know exactly what a lead is worth to the organization in terms of future revenue. So if I multiply the 200 leads times this value of 3,450, I can say that those 200 leads are going to bring the organization over the lifetime of those customers $690,000. I've now connected a metric that we care about in marketing, the net new leads, with a revenue number that is going to be valuable to the rest of the organization. How do you calculate that magic number? Well, it's a little bit different for every organization, so I can't get in too far into details here, but you're going to want to look back at the last 3 to 12 months of past performance and try and figure out, okay, if I'm producing leads or if I'm producing demos or trials or site visits, what does that translate into revenue as I look backwards? And you're going to want to make sure that you look at a broad enough period that you can account for any business cycles. So if your product or service is B2B and falls into business cycles relating to budgetary periods, so January 1, you get a big push in orders, you're going to want to make sure that that's taken into consideration as you look at your look back window. Same thing is true on the consumer side, where if you're selling a product that is going to have a boost during the holidays, you're going to want to make sure that you've got holidays included in your look back window as well. From there, you can calculate your return on investment. And this is the number. This is the magic number that's going to get leadership, clients, whomever you're reporting to jump up and down, because this is the thing that marketing traditionally can't produce. But if you're able to say, we can attribute this much revenue to our marketing activity because we generated these leads, or we generated this interest or this traffic or whatever KPI you're looking at, you subtract out the marketing investment that is again tied directly to your cost of production. So that's your media costs, that's your short-term creative that's only campaign-based creative, and any labor to produce or put that content in market. And you divide that by your marketing investment, you're going to get a number that, if you multiply times 100, is your ROI percentage. Now, it's all well and good to produce metrics around the revenue that your efforts are generating, or the ROI that your efforts are generating, but that doesn't do you any good unless you graph that over time. Because as an executive, as a client, as somebody who is looking at this information, you not only need to know what the number is, but you also want some directionality and momentum to that number. You want to know, is it changing? How fast is it changing? And in what direction is it changing? Are we improving or are we falling behind? So it is extremely important, and you'll see this in the template, that anytime you present revenue or ROI or even KPIs, that you're presenting that number both point in time as well as graphically over time, because otherwise you're not giving that full picture. You're not presenting what is happening to those results over the time period that you're reporting. ROI is well and good, and you want to break down your ROI by each individual program, but that's not the only place that we spend money. Remember, I said that when you're looking at the investment for when you're doing your ROI calculations and you're looking at that investment, you're really only looking at the creative efforts that are short term and apply to that campaign, and you're really only looking at media dollars. Well, we spend money on a lot more than just short term creative and media dollars as we go to do our jobs in marketing. The other money that we spend is generally investing into assets that will improve future marketing efforts. If you think about this in terms of the way that other organizations or the rest of the organization works, the rest of the organization has capital expenditures. These are investments they make in the business, in things like machinery or infrastructure, to allow them to be able to serve customers more efficiently and make the company more money. We in marketing can do the same thing, only our assets are a little bit different. In marketing, our assets, the key assets that we look at, are brand equity or brand value. What is the brand worth? We look at evergreen content, the content that will continue to work for us at least in over a long period of time, if not indefinitely. And then we look at the data that we use to segment and get content in front of our audience. Let's talk about brand for a second here. I don't know if anybody caught this news. I happen to think electric vehicles are really cool, so I totally was paying attention to this. But a couple months ago, Tesla released the Model 3, which is the funny-looking car you see on the screen that doesn't have a grill in the front. It doesn't have a grill because it's an electric vehicle. Now, here's the crazy thing about this. They had 115,000 orders for this car before anybody had seen it. Why? Because of brand equity. People knew and loved and trusted Tesla enough to put a couple $1,000s down on a car they had never actually seen. That's amazing. And it goes to prove the value of having your brand and investing in your brand over the long term. Now, how do you report on that brand? How do you measure that? How do you feed that back to the organization? If you're lucky enough to have a significant budget, you can hire a market research firm to go and measure, aided and unaided awareness. And that's great. Not all of us have that much money to do that, certainly not for every reporting period. I'm going to tell you a little hack that we've learned and we use with our clients in order to get around that. We have figured out that we can use AdWords for a lot of our clients to actually measure brand interest. So what we do is we take a look at how many, we bid on the brand name as a keyword. So, bid on if we were Tesla, we would bid on the keyword of Tesla. And then we measure how many search impressions we get and what percentage of all of the searches we got. And based on those two numbers, we can come up with the total number of times somebody searched for Tesla. And if you think about that, there's going to be a correlation between interest in the brand and awareness in the brand and how many times that particular brand term is Googled. Because I'm not going to Google something that I don't know exists. It's a great little proxy for whether or not there's interest or awareness of your brand name, aside from the products you sell. So that's reporting on brand. We also need to talk about content, though. Content is the second area that we can invest in assets over time for our organization. When we look at content, we are looking at what content produces revenue for us in a long-term asset way. In order for it to do that, there's two things that have to qualify. First, it has to be evergreen content, because if this is content that is newsjacking and it's only applying to something that's a hot topic today, but nobody's going to care about in 6 months, then that's not a long-term asset for us. That investment becomes part of our ROI calculation and not over here on our assets portion. But if it's something that will be referenced for the long haul, then that becomes something that we want to look at. So things like how-to articles or tools or utilities that are going to be valuable long term, even some entertainment pieces. I'm amazed if you look at the Dollar Shave Club, you go to their website, they're still running the same crazy video that they produced 5-6 years ago or something like that. But because it was so good, so iconic, they kind of have to leave it up because it's central to their brand and it continues to draw people in to Dollar Shave Club. That's an example of an entertainment piece that is actually evergreen. So it's not limited just to your how-to articles, your reference pieces, your tools. It can even jump into the entertainment realm as well. So you're going to want to measure your assets that are evergreen, but then also that are high quality. This means that they're tightly targeted. They're targeted at individual segments of your audience, not just at the broad public. This means that they generate new visitors as well, or they enhance the brand, or they drive some sort of action. They're doing something. They're accomplishing something to generate revenue in the end. Once you have that, you're going to simply report on these two items. How many pieces of content do you have? And what is that content? How is that content proving itself to be valuable? How is that content proving itself to be quality? And so the KPIs that we look at for reporting that are generally things like minutes of engagement, new visitors, or if it's content that has a call to action and a direct response component to it, it's persuasive content. That could be just leads or sales that are coming off of this content as it draws visitors into the site and converts them. Most of us aren't that lucky to be able to write that sort of content because most of our sales are a little bit longer cycle than that, but some of us can get away with it. So that covers the content portion of our assets. The next part of our assets that we want to look at is the data. And what data does for us, the way that data, and we put data to work to improve our revenues in the long term, is really twofold. First of all, it tells us how to segment and think about our audience and what individual market segments we can target with personalized content. So the richer the data, the more personalized we can create the experience and the better it's going to convert. Second, the database is what gives us the permission to contact these people. It's only through that permission that we are able to reach out and touch our audience directly. So what do we want to report on? Well, we want to report on our addressable audience. So our addressable audience is the chunk of our audience that we have permission to contact and we have valid contact info. That could be via email. That could be via SMS. Pretty soon that's going to be via chat. It doesn't really matter what that contact permission or info is, but we have some way to address them. It could be push notifications if you have an app. Your opt-in list is your most valuable marketing asset because these people have let you into their inbox. They've let you into their smartphone. They've let you into their chat. And that creates an intimate relationship between them and your brand. You need to be reporting on this asset. You need to be reporting on this asset over time as it grows because it shows where some of your money is going. The second area of data that most of us don't think about reporting because we don't see that as a long-term asset is our first-party data. So the first-party data is the targeting data we get from observing our visitors as they interact with our apps and our websites. Data isn't stored in our own database. Instead, you'll find it stored in the systems that we use to direct advertising. So this could be your custom audiences in Facebook or your tailored audiences in Twitter. If you're running a DSP, maybe one that's specific to retargeting, it's going to be your ad roll segments or your perfect audience segments that you're going to find inside of a retargeting system, or possibly retargeting audiences in one of your other advertising systems, your DSPs, demand side providers like Turn, MediaMath, DoubleClick, AppNexus, et cetera, et cetera. If you're lucky, you have the budget to buy a DMP, a data management platform, something like a BlueKai or a Lotame, that allows you to really do some fancy stuff in mixing and matching these audiences and aggregating them and mixing third-party data with your first-party data to create some killer targeting abilities. The key is you have content on your site that is enriching this data over time, because if you're producing good content, that content now tells you the interests of your audience. Your audience can come in, interact with that content, and tell you what they need, tell you who they are, tell you what matters to them. And if you're listening and properly segmenting, that's going to allow you to, again, deliver much more personalized and rich experiences for that audience in the future. If you're delivering better experiences for that audience in the future, you're going to have a higher conversion rate, meaning more revenue. And at the end of the day, your ability to make money for the organization is going to improve. The last area that I want to talk about as far as reporting comes in the form of your insights that you're generating as a marketing organization. Now, there are two types of insights that you can generate. You can generate insights through third parties where you are paying for market research that you need to do your job. And guess what? That's also applicable to other people within the organization. But additionally, if you're practicing iterative marketing like we promote, then you are constantly running experiments. And these experiments are generating insights on an ongoing basis. So every time you execute an experiment, you are learning a new preference, a new indicator, a new button you can push with it with an individual audience segment that you can now report back to the rest of the organization. This kind of information is very valuable to the executive team and absolutely should be included in your reporting. And it's a great opportunity to show the value of your marketing organization. With that, I'm just going to quickly sum up here to bring it back to what we're talking about today. The reason why it's extremely important to report is because it earns you, your department, the marketing organization as a whole, or your agency, more respect, and more importantly, it gives you the opportunity to ask for more money. Because if you can show that you are being a good steward of the budget that's been given to you, and you can prove the return on that investment, it becomes easy to go back and ask for more investment. Hey, if you put in $1, I give you $2 back. It's a no-brainer. Keep giving me dollars. Second, key things that you want to report up and laterally are return on investment broken down by program. So every time you have a new audience with a different objective, that becomes a new program. Report on the return on investment in that program. The assets that you're building up, your brand, your content, and your data. And then finally, the insights that you are generating for the organization. If I missed anything, please email me. I'd love to connect with you, My contact info is up on the screen right now. And as I said, we will be sending out some slides. So please feel free to connect. I want to thank everybody for their time today. And until next time, onward and upward.